Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of Espresso Cafe. I am making a slight edit to the title, and I am titling it The Brave Science Baristas, Brewing Up Knowledge with Inquiry, a vital element for science learning. And I am thrilled to be joined this afternoon by Tracy and Kathryn from St. Mary's DSG in Kloof to have a little bit of a cuppa and chat about all things science and inquiry. I am very, very thrilled that we have a call of ladies this afternoon because I'm not quite sure the world is yet at a place where women immediately come to mind when we think about science. So it's a privilege to be joined by you and to hear a little bit about your journey into a different approach, I guess, to science teaching, if we had to kind of sum it up. So I'm keen to hear from you. How did this whole journey start? Like, where did you find this approach? What caused you to rethink things? Where did this journey begin?
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for having us. And as you said, we are trying to change the face of women in science. We actually started by grade 9s. Often we do, what does a scientist look like? And we get always those pictures with the grey hair and the glasses and the white lab coat. So we do want to change that stereotype. I think mainly the general journey is that science can be challenging and it's abstract. And we just want our girls to actually be more involved in grappling with it, with concepts. So really was to make it more interesting, get them more engaged, get them into the laboratory, and get them to actually come up with how to explain abstract scientific concepts rather than us just standing in front of them and being the sage on the stage. So that was really the initial motivation. And also to make, if we're interested and passionate and enthusiastic about it, it makes them more excited and engaged in the lesson as well.
And I think, Lindsay, the entrenched stereotypes of that science is a boys' domain, we want to try and shift that narrative, and we believe that there's an underrepresentation of girls taking science for a matric subject. So if we can get girls interested and see the real life value in science and believe that they can do science and it's not just for boffins, that's also the ultimate goal here.
Fabulous. So on our story on the website that you've been kind enough to put together for us to give us some insight into what things look like in your labs and classrooms, you mentioned the 5 E's approach, which for those who are watching and don't know, is a framework for inquiry-based learning. So I'm keen to hear kind of how you learned about that, and then maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that actually looks like in your classrooms. So tell us what the 5 E's are, how you learned about it, and then we can maybe dive into some examples of your innovative teaching.
So, Lindsay, this really all started during COVID. Well, when I say it started, we have for years, it's been a 10+ year journey of changing our approach to science teaching, but we actually found that it had a name when we collaborated with some teachers in the US. And I want to give a shout out to Mark Salata. He has been really instrumental in introducing us to the 5E model, developed by Roger Barbie, who's a STEM education expert in the United States. And because of necessity during COVID, we had to change our style of teaching quite drastically. So when we found we had a name to it, we could really experiment, and we've just flown since then. So, Kathryn, do you want to explain what the 5 E's are?
Yeah. And as Tracy said, I think we were doing the 5E approach, but we didn't actually have a name for it. And this just gave us more of a structure around which to frame all our teaching. So I think for a lot of teachers, inquiry-based learning can be quite overwhelming because there's so many different definitions or ways to do it. So for us, this just works in the classroom. So the first E is for engage, and that normally starts with like a hook or a phenomenon, really just to show, gain interest or show the relevance of the topic that we are learning. And then the second one is for explore. So that normally is an activity that the girls do in the laboratory in groups, so they work collaboratively. And then
So Lindsay, a lot of us, me included, would we fully believed in the practical side of science teaching, but often you will explain a concept first and then take them into the laboratory to show them. And we've actually switched that around as much as we can. We start off with engaging and exploring. And only then, in fact, we encourage the girls to come up with their own models and use their own language before we actually explain. And often we used to do this in reverse. And if you sort of go by the mantra, explore before explain, if you always remember that, you always start off with some kind of practical, engaging task, and only then do you explain using your own, well, the proper scientific terminology.
So we just found that they're able to actually understand the concepts a lot better, because then they've got something, a framework for which to attach it to. And then they do activities where they then elaborate their understanding, now using the correct scientific terminology, and then we evaluate. But those last things, I just want to say, it doesn't have to be like evaluate, elaborate in that order. And evaluate doesn't mean a formal assessment. It can simply be them explaining to someone else what they've learned using the correct.
I use the word show what you know. That's what evaluate is, you know.
Yeah.
So
it's not always, or it could just be a worksheet. So we, when we're doing balancing equations, we've used this quite effectively. And so they use manipulatives like Lego blocks or bottle caps to balance equations, and then they have to do it without those manipulatives. So that's kind of also an evaluation. Like, can they do it without those tools that they figured out themselves as well? So that's one of the ways.
So can you take us through maybe one or two topics in the curriculum that you apply this approach to, and tell us a little bit about what that looks like in your classrooms and your labs?
Okay. So one of our favorites, Lindsay, is Newton's laws, to introduce Newton's laws. And we found that our girls are almost work out Newton's laws for themselves. And our absolute favorite is water races to demonstrate the concept of inertia. So if you can play the video now, you will see that the girls fill the ice cream containers up to the brim with water. We have a race, I say go, and they start going forward, and they realize that as they go forward, the water sloshes backwards. And then there's a short course, and then I abruptly shout stop. They stop very abruptly, and of course the water sloshes forwards. And then we found this an absolutely brilliant model, and easy and free to demonstrate the concept of inertia. And there is such animation, and the girls are there's absolute delight in learning when they do that. So, and we do similar things with Newton 2 and Newton 3, and we've just found that Newton's laws have come alive with us. So that's our grade 11 example. We do the grade 10.
Amazing.
So just tagging on, I mean, I will explain, but at the beginning when you said as well, why did we also go on this journey? Because I know if some topics can be quite dry and boring in science, and so this is an example of something that makes something that's really abstract and can be quite boring really tangible and much more exciting. Fun, yes. Yeah. And also the other thing I was saying is that one of the reasons we also went on this journey is our headmaster a few years ago is very into technology, so we use tablets and devices. So that's why you'll see we also use a lot of simulations, which also help to make things more engaging. And I know a lot of teachers know about PhET simulations. We love PhET simulations. So here you can see we're using it with the grade 9s when they're exploring electricity. And again, we don't teach them what all the components are. They have to actually figure out how to make the light bulb light up. But actual circuit boards are notoriously temperamental. So it's very frustrating. So they can't actually see it. So using it with the PhET simulation, they can then actually see what do they have to work out on the actual physical circuit board to get it to work, because it always works on the PhET simulation. So then it just helps to make that connection and understanding that you need a closed circuit and a source of energy. And on the simulation, it's quite nice because they can actually see there's electrons flowing. So they get the idea of that the charge isn't used up, but that the energy is used up in the resistors. And then they also grapple with what a series and a parallel circuit is. So again, unpacking all those concepts that before you would have just kind of stood up and
Exactly.
taught they actually figure it out and make sense of it.
And I think that's an excellent use of technology to serve learning, not just to replace, something that would have been done, because you've changed the role of the teacher and the role of the student. And now the student is engaging with the technology in hands-on exploration. It's not just the teacher standing at the front of the class, showing the simulation and explaining it. So I think that's an incredible way to concretize learning and make sure that they are actually engaged and that those concepts are forming. So well done on not just using technology as a textbook behind glass, is what I'm saying.
No, I think you do have to find a way. And I also think it's just also the girls are amazing. They've actually taught us that the questions they come up with as well, it's also just they become curious as well. They like wonder, why does this do this, and then they explore more as well than if we had just put up a circuit board on the screen.
And Lindsay, we found that with this approach, it stimulates curiosity. It gives them that spark, and then they can then move beyond general curiosity into the realms of critical thinking. And we found that is very, very effective, and we found that we have good results with that as well.
Exactly. And I mean, I think as Mark has aptly commented here, it's giving students learning experiences that will last for a lifetime. And that is the beauty of it, right? It's not just a lesson that will be forgotten. It's an experience that will be remembered. So well done on being brave and shaking things up. I'm curious as to whether you've had any kind of struggles or challenges in your journey in using this approach, because now it's quite widespread by the looks of things. Your girls are getting into it. What have been some of your challenges, maybe just so that we can encourage those who are watching, who are thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to try this, to give them some strategies to, things to look out for, and some strategies to make this kind of learning as successful as it can be.
So Lindsay, the first thing I would say is start small. It can be overwhelming at first. Start with one grade and one specific concept. And once you've mastered that, move on to something else. As we've said, this has been a journey of several years, and we've tweaked and mastered. Every year we change it up. So start small. And Kathryn, maybe talk about girls.
Yeah. I also think we're fortunate that we're a 3-person department and we all work really well and we encourage each other. So we're all on board. I think that also helps. I think it's challenging if people and your department aren't all on board. So that's a benefit for us. But as Tracy said, I think it can be overwhelming. So don't rehaul your whole syllabus. Like we just start in grade 8 and 9 with small sections. And I think also use your connections. You're welcome to reach out to us, because lots of people, I don't think what we're doing is new. I think we've just been brave enough to kind of like put up our hand and share it with people. So I think there's lots of people who have lots of ideas. As I was telling Lindsay before, we were inspired by one of the PurpleZA stories on the Esteem from St. Mary's Waverley on their book Creator Projects. So we modified that. So there are lots and lots of ideas. There are also really good platforms that we've used. I like one called Better Lesson. They've got actually a lot of, they use the 5E approach, so they've got lots of ideas on that. We also joined the Royal Society of Chemistry, the American Association of Chemistry Teachers. So there's lots of different platforms, and a little bit of AI. I don't know if anyone's used EduAid, but I was looking at it recently, and they actually have the 5E approach as one of their options to create a lesson using the 5E approach. So I was really delighted when I saw that. So that's also going to be a time saver. I mean, it's not perfect, but at least it's a platform. And then, as Tracy said, the other stumbling block was really just our learners. It's very different because they want the teacher to stand up there and tell them exactly what they need to learn and what's in the exam. And now we are making it more student-centered, and we want them to actually be engaged. So sometimes it was really hard, to get them actually talking and answering questions because they're worried about saying the wrong thing, and you say there's no wrong answer. And it's about encouraging them to learn from their mistakes as well, and that we actually are a learning community and we're collaborating and learning together. So I think that was our biggest resistance, was actually our learners.
And getting them to take risks.
Taking a risk
They just don't want to take risks, because to take a risk is to be vulnerable, and they don't always like to be vulnerable. And we really learned and to tell them to practice courage. Courage can be learned, and we are walking examples of courage can be learned. And we try to actually pass this on to our girls. And slowly but surely, if we start in grade 8, by the time they get to the grade 10 and 11, it starts becoming second nature to them to actually take risks. And I think just one other thing is that questioning is so important. We've learned how to question properly. You can't just throw them in the deep end and just give them a task to do. We've really learned how to scaffold questions properly to actually lead them in an investigation. And we find that this gives them courage, and we put them in small groups and they collaborate together, and with well-framed scaffolded questions to guide them, we found that they really, really benefit from this approach.
Yeah, and I love that what you've said now highlights the power of modeling the things that we want our students to be, to be embodying. Because I think often it's like we want our students to be innovative thinkers who do exactly what we say. But what you are doing in using this approach is really modeling curiosity, modeling courage, modeling collaboration, working within your department. I remember the first time I did a collaborative project with my colleagues, and one of my students came and said, "Ma'am, it's so good to see you collaborating, because teachers are always telling us to collaborate, but they never collaborate." And I think that's a real strength of what you've done, is that you've actually you're not just telling them to inquire, you are inquirers yourselves. And you started off saying, right, like, there's got to be a better way. How do we find this? You're putting yourself out there, you're connecting, and you're following your own learning journey. Speaking of AI, this was not scripted, but I think it's only smart that we collaborate with AI as well, and kind of loop AI into part of our team. So there is a tool called Magic School. I'm not sure if you've discovered this yet, but it also has a 5E model science lesson plan generator. So we'll put the link to all of the tools that you have mentioned in the chat. But really what this demonstrates to me is that you are not alone, and that through collaboration we can definitely change our approach to make it more student centered. And as you've mentioned, almost like brewing a coffee, it's like the repeated process, and each time you get better.
Lindsay, what I wanted to say was that talking about collaboration, I encourage teachers to use social media because during COVID, I went onto social media. I rejoined Twitter after being very dormant for years and years and years. I joined Facebook's groups of science teachers in America and the UK. And I've got so many of my ideas from Twitter. They call it EduTwitter. And I can't believe how much stuff there is out there if you just reach out. And there are teachers overseas who have been so kind to me and have shared their stuff with us. And also a big shout out to Martin Palermo. He has been amazing in sharing. He is what they call a master teacher in New York State. And he has been fantastic in sharing his knowledge. In fact, he's even given our girls a little video lesson. So collaboration is key. I can't stress it enough.
Absolutely. And those of you who are watching, please also share your ZA Edu stories. If you go to the website that's linked in the chat, you'll actually see there's the link. At the bottom, there's a share your story button. So let's keep that collaboration going and continue to learn from each other's examples. If you don't know where to start, take something that Tracy and Kathryn have done and copy it and paste it and make it your own, right? Because ultimately this is all about building an amazing culture of learning across South Africa and across the world. So thank you for being shining examples of that. Before our coffee runs out, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to share around your experience, or any advice that you would give that you haven't already to teachers who are wanting to move forward and explore the space of the 5 E's learning in science and maybe even in other subjects?
Yeah, I think that's just actually be willing to laugh if it fails. Like the girls really don't mind, like you said, that modeling, and some things don't work. So then you just refine it and just be brave and courageous, and take a risk. I think that's the main thing. And it also, I don't know, it makes me more excited, like, because I enjoy what I'm doing and I'm excited, and when it's just so rewarding as well. Like a lot of those comments that those girls wrote really was just out of their mouths. Like I was telling the one girl that we were going to the St. John's Impact Conference and sharing about how our approach, and she was just like surprised that it was like a novel approach, because she just thought this was the norm. And she was like, oh. And this is why science is so much fun and it's exciting. And that was from one of my grade 11s, which normally by grade 11 they're kind of a little bit over it and jaded, and so they're actually our shining role models in this thing. And I also want to say, I know that it is time consuming at first, but it does get easier and quicker, and your learners also once they know the system, it actually helps to make your lessons go faster and you get through the work, even though it seems time consuming at first. You'll actually benefit in the long run.
And I also want to say, Lindsay, that you might be a teacher. I've been teaching for over 30 years, and I've learned so much in the last few years. And I think you must have the mindset of that you're a lifelong learner, and you're afraid to learn. And often the student, and don't be afraid to let your students teach you. It's a symbiotic relationship. So yeah, it's exciting, and I promise you, your teaching will get more exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies. You are absolutely inspiring science learning baristas, and thank you for giving us a taste of what you've been brewing up in your classrooms on Espresso Cafe today and on the story. We look forward to hearing another teacher coming onto Espresso Cafe saying, you know what, I saw what those ladies did and here's what I've done with it, as we can keep paying it forward and building that culture of learning. So thank you to those of you who have tuned in and those of you who are watching the rerun. We really appreciate you having a cuppa with us, because we know the kind of teachers who take time to invest in their learning are exactly the kind of teachers that this country needs. So until next time, keep learning and keep innovating. We will see you soon.
Thanks so much for having us, Lindsay.